It's been said that traditional male roles, values, and behaviors have changed. Our societies say that the norms and the expectations from men and masculinity have also changed because of these conversations that we see happening in the marketplace today. It's been said that the relationships between men and women have been altered to the extent that there is a phrase that has been coined since the 80s, which is called toxic masculinity. And within that is a description of all negative male behaviors. And it's a dumping place, toxic masculinity, for whatever men do that is unacceptable, unsociable, unspiritual, unrighteous, and even illegal. We're going to talk about that today because I believe that the men in America are developing an identity crisis, and it's time we started talking about it. I'm John DeBerry Jr. This is ETBN, and welcome to Iron Sharpens Iron. We have two men on our set today. We have Mark White on the set, actually. We have Edward DeBerry from Charlotte, North Carolina, by virtue of Zoom, who's with us today. And both of these men are men that I respect because we've known each other for years. Of course, my brother and I have known each other all of our lives, and I've known Mark White for well over 20 years as the chair of education and as a fellow legislator. Uh, Gentlemen, it's been said that gender roles have changed, that the roles that men have traditionally played and women have traditionally played, that those are passe, that they are no longer relevant, and men have to get in touch more with their feminine side and women with their masculine side. So we have all of this topsy-turvy discussion going on in the marketplace. What do you think about that, Mark?
Thank you very much, John. Good to be with you and Ed today. I think you're right on target. As the chair of the House Education Committee for the past 8 years and serving on that with you for many of those years, I think there's no more important conversation that we can have today than how we are raising our children, our boys and our girls. And I would like to strongly focus on the nuclear family again, on the role of the father in the home, the role of the mother in the home. And so this is nothing new. You go back and read about human history for the past 4,000 years. And we go through cycles. And it's up to the current generation of each generation to correct the course when we get off point.
I think you're absolutely right. Edward, do you think that we have an identity crisis in America? We talk to men all the time, and we watch television programs, we watch the news, we watch movies, we see the male heroes becoming more feminized and the female heroes becoming more masculine. I'm not making a judgment. I'm just noting what we see in the marketplace. Do you think that this is creating an identity crisis for men in our society today?
Well, my response will be from two perspectives. One, as a minister in the Church of Christ, of course, I think that my reference point, as should be the reference point for our country, is Bible-based, what God's law is. God created man and female, male and female, and expected and put within them certain traits, certain behaviors, certain obligations toward each other. And of course, that's all rooted in love, the way God set up the family, as Mark mentioned. The other is from the perspective of a network producer for over 30 years and being able to watch, again, as Mark said, we go through cycles in society. A lot of times those cycles seem to be pushed by special interests. And so when we see the influence of special interests on society, we see extreme behavior. We see people blaming what this term toxic masculinity on things, everything from, to rape to all kinds of misconduct, and saying we've got to make rules to govern how people conduct themselves, conduct their lives, rather than really looking at the root of the cause, and it's the destruction of the family as God set the family in place. We see that men don't have the kind of role models that they should, and when they don't, and obviously this is my opinion, but when they don't have the kind of role models, then they will drift off into behavior that is not conducive to a healthy society.
Well, let me interrupt you right there because you mentioned the Bible just a moment ago, and of all of us, all three of us are men who have a faith-based morality, our integrity, our principles, our morality, how we treat our family, how we treat our wives, how we conduct ourselves in public is based on the biblical standard of morality. But in the marketplace today, they say that this old Bronze Age book, the Bible, has no relevance in the conversation today. So, you bring up the Bible. Each of us are men of faith. Do you think that part of the problem is that the Bible has been removed from its traditional position in the discussion, in the debate, and in American society?
I do. I actually do believe that it has. We've done it to ourselves for many, many years in the generation. I was born in the 1950s, and so I've seen ever since that time where the Bible is a great group of stories, but is it relevant? Are the stories even true?
Yeah, fables.
Fables.
Yeah.
Is the flood really real, and
Yeah.
things of that nature. If you are a faith-based person, you believe that every story, every scripture is true. And God gave it to us for our own edification. And if we will follow that, then we really have complete freedom. We have freedom in our homes to love and raise our children and our husbands and wives to love each other. We have to get back to that, and we have moved away from it.
Yeah. Edward?
Well, we can debate whether or not the Bible is true or real. That's a different discussion. But the point is, or something that is inescapable, when you read the Bible and you hold the Bible as a mirror to the things that we see in society, it's easy to see that the Bible is right. And if we would conduct ourselves by the things that we read in the Bible, we know that things would be a lot better. If we had households where they are structured the way the Bible has structured the family, not saying that women cannot work in a professional role. That's not what we're saying at all. But, we need to have distinctive roles, and little girls need to know what femininity is, and they need to see it in action with their mothers, their aunts, and different other women in the workplace. Men are the same. They need to see healthy examples of fathers and men that take responsibility, leaders in the community. But that has to start in the home. A president needs to be raised, whether it's male or female. They need to be raised in a house that has healthy values and healthy morals. And so when they grow up, they'll have a good reference point. If that doesn't happen, then these men or women will not have good, healthy, sound moral reference points.
All right, now you just mentioned something again, and I think that when we look at the debate that is happening in the marketplace today, there are folks who are saying these traditional roles, of the mother, of the father, and the nucleus of the home, and the way the home that we were brought up in, Edward, with our mother and father. I think first of all, there is a fallacy and a falsehood that is perpetuated that femininity is weak. Well, when you read the Bible, there is nothing weak about femininity, especially when we see the roles of women in the keepers of the house. They were the ones many times who did the farming, who raised the children, who kept the house safe while the men were hunting and gathering. There was nothing weak about femininity in the scripture. There was nothing weak about our mother. And, I tell folk all the time, my mama had a switch that turned corners. And she raised us and taught us and demanded respect. She demanded awe and obedience, as did our father. So what about these traditional roles? There are folks who are saying that the men should stay home and raise the children, that the women should go and earn the bread. And I'm not getting into that argument about women working or not working. I'm simply talking about roles. Uh, uh, are there roles that are traditional? Are all of those gone away? And we really even shouldn't talk about it today.
Ed, you want to jump in first, and I'll jump in after you?
Well, go ahead, Mark.
Well, let me just start out with focus on one reason a couple years ago. That's why I wrote the book about fathers in the home and their role. There's nothing greater than a strong woman in the household. They have such an important role, but we each have roles. And that's the issue that we're talking about today.
Right.
We get outside those roles. We're created in the image of God, and we have a certain role to play. But the book I wrote about why fathers are important in the home, which we have too much lack of that today. And I think that's why we have a lot of crime in our streets, and why we so hard for you and I on the education committee to teach children to read as they get to schools. But I wrote down a number of years ago in a book, a father is a provider. He is an encourager, and he is also a protector. He has certain roles that he is to engage in, and mother and the wife has certain roles to engage in. The nuclear family, if there's one reason to believe in a creative God, is that he created the nuclear family to where each husband and wife in that family has a son or daughter, whether it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or more children. Those children are raised seeing and respecting what those two role models see. And as they grow up into society, and then as they come out by the millions into society, we have an orderly society. Reason we don't have an orderly society right now because we're into a time period of chaos, because children are not being raised in a nuclear home.
Right. And the beautiful thing about marriage, as we see it within the scripture, is the man and the woman both are subservient and subjective to submit to God. And then, having submitted to God, they both submit to one another. They are stronger as a group, that as a couple. When the threefold cord is wrapped tight, the emotional, the physical, and the spiritual, it's not easily broken, as the prophet said. And from the very beginning, God gave Adam the privilege of being the first prophet. When he looked upon Eve, who God had created, Adam said, "She's bones of my bones, flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman. Therefore shall a man leave father and mother and cleave to his wife." That word cleave takes in two different things. First of all, that woman, I tell young men all the time, I've done a lot of weddings in my day. I said, she is not your property and she's not your child. She is your counselor. She is your equal. She is one who is there to strengthen you, strengthen your home, and strengthen your marriage. But she has to submit to God just as you have to submit
Amen.
to God. And when we see what they're calling toxic masculinity today, we're talking about a man who does those type of things that are not spiritually acceptable. They are not morally acceptable, and and many times not even legally acceptable. So this is just a person who is unprepared, unacceptable, and socially irreverent. And that's what we've got to get to. Edward?
Mark mentioned chaos in society, and we know the scripture says God is not the author of confusion. Mm-hmm. And what happens when you walk away from God's guidance is there will be confusion, and you have a muddling of the roles. God, in his wisdom, had a role. He gave Adam a job before he gave him Eve. And he meant for man to work and provide for his family. When God gave Adam the gift of a companion, it went without saying that he was to protect and provide for her. That is a perpetual obligation for a man who takes on a wife and takes on a family. And you raise those children, the women understanding, the girls understanding the roles of women, and the men understanding the roles of the little boys understanding the roles of men. So as they grow older, it doesn't conflict with their roles in society as far as work, as far as leadership. Uh, those things can be distinguished. But when it comes to the home and the nurturing of the family, those young people need to see what the distinctive roles are. So when that doesn't happen, you will have that kind of confusion that we're seeing in society today.
When there is respect, Mark?
I was just going to interject real quick as we're talking about this. A lot of people listen, they say, well, that sounds good. It sounds the right way to go, but how do you do it when the rubber meets the road and you're in the home and you're raising children and your wife and your husband are getting out working every day and trying to carry out the daily things? Well, the way you do it is we are created in the image of God and we are subservient to Him first. And so you give up your selfishness, complete unselfishness. So when you're dealing with your wife or you're dealing with your children, you put yourself last and you start listening to each other. If you have to have your own way in the home, things become dysfunctional. So I think we just need to point that out. That's how you do what we need to do every day in the house.
Yeah, I've heard, Mark, that is so profound. I've heard men and women say, well, the traditional roles between the mother and the father and the husband and the wife, those roles have been changed, that the lines have been blurred, and that either can fit in either side as far as those roles are concerned. I've heard men say that God made us the head of the house. Well, I say, well, He didn't do you any favor, because if you're the head of the house, then whatever is needed, you have to do first. If you want respect, then you got to give respect first.
Mm-hmm.
If you want someone to love you, then you got to love them first.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, the man, he has got to be an individual who initiates. He initiates love and respect and care and protection and provisions. And guess what? That woman responds right back with the same thing he initiated.
Absolutely.
But those are the traditional roles that are being argued today. It's been said that the only reason that Mark White, Edward D. Berry, and John D. Berry act the way we do as men is because it was forced upon us as children. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. With us today is Chairman Mark White. He's been in the House of Representatives now, Mark, for how many years?
12.
For 12 years. And of those 12 years, 8 of those years, he has been the chair of the powerful Education Committee in the state of Tennessee. That is an attribute to Mark's competence and his ability as a legislator. Mark has been a principal. He's been a teacher. He is a graduate of the University of Memphis. He has a degree in conflict resolution and from David Lipscomb University. And also with us, Ed DeBerry. I happen to know this guy pretty good. He's my brother. We kind of grew up and wrestled and kicked each other in bed as kids. But he is a graduate of the University of Montreat University. Did I say that right, Edward?
Yeah, Montreat University.
Montreat University. And he also has a teacher's degree from UT Knoxville. And for 30 years, this guy's been all over the world doing the Olympics. He is a senior producer at one of our major networks here in the United States. And we're just glad to have both of them with us. Mark, why don't you take just a moment and tell us about the book that you wrote, because it is a great book. It's a great read, and it goes right to the heart of some of the issues we're talking about.
Thank you, John, and I appreciate the opportunity. A number of years ago, I put together a book called May I Call You Dad? Why Fathers Are Needed in the Home, because I have a great passion for children. As you mentioned, I chair the House Education Committee in the Tennessee General Assembly, and you and I sat on that committee together for many years, and I really miss you right now, by the way. John and I, we've worked together so long that we can almost complete each other's sentences. Yeah. But you remember all the times we were having all these legislation. Well, how do we help teach a child to read, or how do we do this, or how do we do that? It always came back down to, well, if we had more help in the home, then it would work. So I put together this book. What is the role of the father in the home that we're talking about today? The mother, she has her role, and she's working time and a half overtime in so many cases in the home nowadays, where we have absentee fathers. So I was focusing on the role of the father. And to have a strong father in the home, and I put down 13 reasons in this book what a father is there for. Just to name a few, he's there to provide a child with meaningful education, make sure the child gets up and goes to school every day. A provider of unconditional love. I learned this with a teenage daughter when I was raising her, is that you love them first, regardless of whether you get love back. You're the father, you love that child, and that love will be returned to you. A protector from predators and abusers, a guide to faith and spirituality, an encourager of self-worth. So many young people grow up without self-worth. To be a role model, to be a listener, to be a provider of accountability and correction, provider of a safe and stable home environment, provider of wisdom and understanding, and also give hope for the future when the child leaves the home. So the father has a key role, an important role, and when it goes missing, the children suffer.
Well, now it's been said, and we talked about this earlier, it's been said that these roles that you just called off, all of these wonderful attributes and all of these great duties that you spoke of, that they are something of another century, of another time. And when we consider the fact that the feminist movement, which began in the 60s, and rightly so, women deserve equal pay. They deserve, if you have a woman sergeant or colonel in the military, you better respect her the same way you would a male. If your CEO, CFO is a female, you better give her the same obedience and awe that you would a male. So that's not even in the discussion. What we're talking about is within that home setting, to where those two people work together as a team to get the children where they need to go, provide for them what they need so that they can grow up and as you said, have self-esteem, self-worth. They can be confident. They're ready for the world. And that's a team effort. And when any team you have, everybody's not the quarterback. Right. Everybody's not the tackle. Everybody's not a right guard. Not everybody is not a tight end or a linebacker. Everybody plays their role, and it is hard to understand why we don't feel like and we don't think we should play these roles as God gave them in the home. We're not talking about corporate America. We're not talking about academia.
Right.
We're not talking about the medical field. We're talking about in the home.
And what we're talking about is the foundation. The terrible catastrophe that happened in the condominium in South Florida, how do you have a strong 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th floor? It's the foundation, that gave away. And we're talking about the father and the role of the father and the mother, the nuclear home. That's the foundation. And when it gives way, everything else comes down. And that's what we're experiencing.
That's true. Edward?
I think we talked about some of the things that happened as far back in the 60s and maybe even before, but a transitional thing that happened in society was the de-emphasis of the family structure in terms of relationships without commitments, free love, free sex, like that. And when you have a child that is the product of an uncommitted relationship, well, that foundation is not going to be there. You're not going to have the role models and the examples of committed fathers and mothers. When we had our child, and I'm sure the same happened in y'all's family, our emphasis was on that child. My wife and I had to take a back seat to the needs of that child. Our greatest love, our greatest emphasis was that child. I would go to work thinking about getting back home so that I could see my baby. I was motivated to work because I wanted to provide for my wife and for my baby. I tried to change anything that I thought about my behavior that would be a destructive example for my baby. So when you don't have that and children are just growing up any type of way, for instance, especially with we talked a lot about young men, But even with young women, if they, or especially I should say, with young women, if they don't have the proper male role model and a father, then they have hazardous relationship statistics show with their own men that they select because they don't have the right example. When they have the right example of what a man should be, what a father should be, the roles of a man and a father, then they know better what to look for. And again, statistics show that they have better outcomes with their relationships.
Very well said.
When we think about our dad, and we lost dad maybe 15 years ago or so, and our father was about 83, but we watched our father work. We watched him go through trials and tribulation. We watched him deal with the loss of our mother. We watched him deal with trying to raise small children by himself. All of those things that we watched in our father, Edward, myself, my brother Tony, and even my sisters, but especially the three of us as men, we understood what it meant to be a man. We understood that because we watched and listened and heard. We watched a man grieve over the loss of his wife. We watched a man get up and pull himself back together after almost dying from that grief and building a life and a business for himself. So, we are who we are, and we understand that because we had a man in our lives. We had a wonderful mother. We had a wonderful grandmother. But we had Edward and we had three generations. We had Big Papa, that was our great grandfather. We had Papa Stalin, that was our grandfather. And we had Dad, our father. And between those three men, we knew what it meant to be a man. There was no doubt about it. It wasn't toxic. It wasn't foolish. It wasn't strutting like a peacock. It wasn't showing off. It wasn't styling, smiling, and profiling. It was acting in such a way that God would be pleased with who we are. And that's the reason why on Sunday morning, you have three men in the pulpit. And that's a tribute to our dad, as well as our mother, but to our dad in showing us how to be a man. Let me ask y'all this before we close tonight. When we think about this, I said earlier, I know the scripture says that iron sharpens iron, that men ought to motivate one another to be men. Men ought to challenge one another. The scriptures speak about provoking one another to good works. Do you think that we have become too lax and making too many excuses, that we have become too accepting of behavior that is not traditional male behavior as far as the scriptures say, or as the military, or just what a family needs? Do you think that we become too accepting of a altered and changed masculinity that is moving too quickly toward femininity?
I think that is a big issue of today, and I think what's happening, and this is why I'm passionate about it, I'm glad you invited me today to be with you and your brother Ed, is that we sometimes we don't want to push back because it's hard, and because sometimes it just let things go along. I'll do what I need to do, but our society is suffering from it right now. Our nation is suffering from it. Our schools, as I mentioned a second ago, we could fix 95% of the problems in our schools right now if we would reestablish a strong home with strong fathers and role models and strong mothers. And so we are losing that, and we're not standing up and saying, no, we need to stand firm on what we're talking about: a nuclear family, strong fathers and mothers in the home.
Absolutely. Edward?
I think that we have to remember, and you said this so many times, John, in the pulpit, that a man is not an ugly woman and a woman is not a pretty man. We have
Right.
distinctive character. We have distinctive traits. God, in his ultimate wisdom, brought different things from each side, from the male and the female side. A woman is nurturing. A man it should be masculine. And the child should have a dose of both. And that keeps that child healthy. when we don't see that, when we see the instability, we talked about extremes. It goes to the extreme, but it also muddles boundaries. My youngest daughter was a college athlete, and for any athlete, you have to work hard, and it teaches athleticism, teaches them the equation of hard work and reward. But when we reward people for finishing last, we muddle that equation. And so we start saying, that's okay, you did the best you can, which is okay, but we don't give them a trophy for it. We ask them, or we tell them, we demand that they work harder. And this keeps stability in society. When we give you free stuff, uh, for no matter how you perform, then it muddles society, and people just get away with half behavior. And it's not just in the workplace, it's in every aspect of society. So, a woman can be however she wants and demands that she be accepted. A man can be as sorry as he wants to be and demand that he needs to be accepted for that behavior, no matter how problematic it might be. And so you end up with a society that continues to compromise on what God expects for women and for men to be.
Well, I think that we've had a very good discussion today. And when you think about this issue of toxic masculinity, there are myths and there are facts. We're not denying that there are problems in America today. We're not denying that there are problems that have to be dealt with as far as the role of both men and women. But toxic masculinity as a term and can't be just the dumping place for everything that we find distasteful in men. What we have to do, and what we'll talk about in our next show. Dr. Martin Luther King said something when he made that famous speech in 1963. He said that he wanted his children judged by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. And the one thing that we haven't focused on since that wonderful speech was made is character and the content of character. We've concentrated on all the things that bring the pleasure, prosperity, even education. All of those are wonderful things. But when you don't build the character, then you're leaving yourself open to all types of problems. I'm John DeBerry Jr. with Mark White, Edward Earl DeBerry from Charlotte, North Carolina. And we thank you for being with us today. This has been Iron Sharpens Iron.